Shalom. Welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Delmar Chabad Center, and today we're going to talk about the holiday of Succos. Well, the fall time brings in it with the harvest. We're not farmers today, but we do know in the Capital District that the apples are coming out, and it's the apple season, and the grapes are being harvested, and generally it's the harvest season for many crops. And it was celebrated in Israel as a holiday also. Now, we have to remember that even though we're not farmers, we do have what to celebrate the harvest season with, because we do eat. We're not the farmers, and again, we didn't do the plowing and sowing, and maybe we don't get that excited about when a beautiful harvest is out, but you can go to an apple orchard or different orchards, and everybody gets a little excited when they see all the trees in full blossom and everything bearing fruit. So we have to tune in ourselves into the order of nature also. Like, for example, you can't remove yourself from nature because, like I say, you have to eat whether you're a farmer or you're a city slicker. So therefore, we all have to celebrate the harvest time. And the Torah has given us a special holiday. It's right at the fall time, which is, again, when we talk about lunar months, it's always going to be around the middle of September to about the middle of October. That we're talking about not solar years, so therefore it's always going to be variables. But it's, like I say, around the equinox of the fall season, or the late September. And what Jewish people do, and I have a little picture to demonstrate, I couldn't bring in a whole sukkah here, but they sit in huts. So here you can see a little bit of a hut, and you sit in there. Some of them are small. All they have to do is have you sit in them. Some are very big. You can put 10, 20, 30 people in them. Depends how you're big. They're just temporary walls. It's only for 1 week. And you see here, they make them out of boards. I know a lot of people put plastic around them, temporary. And the roof, as you could see, is like leaves over the roof. And bushes or branches, for example. Now, that's surely not one of your best roofing materials. Ask any roofer, there's going to be leaks. But in a way, that is really the point behind it, because you're supposed to feel a temporary residence. Well, when you're in like you can imagine, almost like a shack, if you want to say. Usually they call it like huts or booths. But it's like a little shack, and yeah, the wind is rustling through the walls, and the rain is dripping on your head a little bit. And you're actually supposed to leave enough branches so you can see the sky, see the stars of the night. Well, that's a very temporary residence, to say the least. Some people even sleep in these residences. You have to remember, at the times when the Jewish people were mainly living in Israel or maybe in Babylonia, the Mideast for the most part, September is still a very nice season. People go, like, for example, even to Miami now. It's probably 80, 90 degrees in the fall. But in the north, where we are, of course, that you're going to get rainy and chilly times, and therefore it's not conducive to sleeping in the sukkah. Most people will only eat in the sukkah. Now, when you're sitting in the sukkah, you're a little bit scared. The wind, like I say, is rustling, and you don't have any big bolts on the doors. We have to remember that our stay in this world is a temporary residence. Now, you don't have to sit in this huts the whole year, but once a year, the Torah has told us that for 1 week, you sit in these little huts with these branches over them, and you should be able to, like, more in tune with nature. That's one of the reasons for the huts. And we'll get into some other reasons, but I just want to give over the basic idea of the mitzvahs. There's always deeper, more appreciative ideas behind it. You see this pole? Well, it's a picture of a lulav. A lulav is a palm branch. They call it the 4 species. It's made out of a myrtle, the myrtles, hadassah, which in Hebrew is the palm branch, the willows, and the myrtles. And you bind them all together, as maybe you could see here, and then you put the esrog. Esrog looks like a big lemon, but it's the lemon family, but it's a citron, and you hold those 4 things together during the services on the 7 days of Succos, and you pray and say a blessing over them to symbolize the idea of the harvest. Now, like I told you, these are the basic ideas of what the Succos holiday. Succos always starts 2 weeks exactly after Rosh Hashanah, the New Year. So there's a real holiday season You have Rosh Hashanah, then 10 days later we all know is Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. Then just 5 days later comes Sukkot, and that lasts really for 9 days. So really you're talking a lot of busy holiday season for the Jewish people, and there's a lot of interesting times for that. Without further ado, maybe like I said, these are just the most basic ideas. I wanted to give over some other deeper appreciations of certain things that happen to the holiday. Many times when we talked about the different holidays through this program for the few years that we've been here, we always brought out this idea, and again we have to reiterate, that in the times of the temple, when I mean the temple, it's not the synagogue temple, I'm talking about the temple in Jerusalem, which like only the Western Wall is still there. Things would be a lot different. First of all, there would be the main synagogue, and on the holidays, everybody would go there to one unifying place. And of course, there was sacrifices, and you're not allowed to sacrifice any animals outside of that temple. So, for the last few thousand years, there hasn't been sacrifices, obviously. And there's also, this is a very interesting mitzvah. It's going to be very simplistic to you from the beginning. That's why I wanted to get into it and give more explanation to it. It's a celebration of water drawing. Now, I'm sure you're thinking and saying to yourself, well, water drawing, what kind of celebration is that? I told you before, harvest, and I think any person can understand that the harvest, surely for a farmer, just like the culmination of all of their hard work, surely is what to make a celebration. And even for us, like again, we see the trees, we see the fruits, and of course we're happy that we're going to be eating for the coming season. So you understand now there's what to be happy about. But a water drawing ceremony? What's so happy about a water drawing ceremony? Again, this is only at the times of the temple. And like we always say, it's been a few thousand years since the temple has been standing in Jerusalem. But still, it's what to learn and to relive. And like we say, we always hope that it'll be rebuilt soon in our days. So let's see what it is. Without further ado, the celebration of the water drawing. What was the manner of the water libation? They used to fill a golden pitcher holding 3 lugs, which is about, well, if you're talking about a lug, it's about a half a pint. These different measurements, of course, in the times of the temple a few thousand years ago. It's about, maybe you're going to talk about a half a gallon, with water drawn from the Siloam. It's a brook there, creek. When they reached the water gate, they blew on the shofar, the tekiah. Well, you remember this from the Rosh Hashanah, the New Year's, where the key is just one long note. The true is da 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 da, staccato, and the tekiah again is a long note. On the right of the altar ramp were 2 silver bowls. They each had a hole like a narrow snout, one wide, the other narrow, so that both bowls emptied themselves together. The wider one was for wine, since wine flows out more slowly. The bowl to the west was the water, the one to the east was for wine. So what would happen is that they would take these 2 bowls and pitchers, let's call them, and pour them into water, and the wine would mix together and make a libation on the altar. Again, maybe I should also say again that when everybody was at the temple, it was a happening, if we could use that word. I mean, like again, I said to you, everybody had to be there, but use a little more imagination when I say that. And like thousands and tens of thousands of people would converge on the temple at one time. People are in Woodstock. I wasn't there, but I mean, from what was there, people said there's a more feeling. I mean, you could do something by yourself, and maybe it's a joy thing and happy. It's like any part, listening to music. Well, it's nice to be by yourself listening to music, but you know, if there's a lot of people there, it just makes the whole event more joyous. Yeah, this is the same thing also. I mean, maybe by yourself and sing something wouldn't be the biggest thing, but remember, tens of thousands of people would join you and be together with this interesting idea. It says in the Gemara, in the Talmud, he that had never seen the Simcha Beis Shueva, the joy of the water drawing, has never in his life seen joy. That's what I'm trying to bring out to you, that, again, I'm trying to emphasize this point, that it may still not seem to be like an important idea to you and to be there happy. This is what the Talmud says. If you've never seen this water drawing ceremony, you've never seen really what joy really is. At the close of the first festival day, they went down to the court of the women and made great preparations there. Now, try to make your imaginations, because this is something we can't duplicate by, it's something that in the temple and tens of thousands of people, but this is where imagination comes into play. There were golden candlesticks there with 4 golden bowls on the top of them. The candlesticks were 50 cubits high. Now, a cubit's about 1.5 feet. So you're talking about a 75-foot candlestick. 4 ladders led up to each candlestick, and 4 youths from the priestly stock went up holding in their hands jars of oil of 24, again, those lugs, which is a half a pint, so it's about a few gallons capacity, which they poured into the bowl. They made wicks out of worn-out garments of the Kohanim, of the priests, and nothing went to waste, don't you see? And with them they set the candlesticks alight. And there was not a courtyard in Jerusalem that did not reflect the light of the Beis HaMikdash. Now, if people were in Jerusalem, if not, you can imagine, again, it was a city. Now, from one place, from a few candlesticks to light up, tremendously lit up. And again, this is, use your, maybe even not only your imagination, but just use your experiences. You know, when you see something, an event at night and all the lights are on, it just becomes a more joyous event. So here was so lit up that Jerusalem, the whole city of Jerusalem was lit up. Men of piety and good deeds used to dance before them with burning torches in their hands, singing songs and praises. And countless Levites played on harps, lyres, cymbals, and trumpets, and other instruments of music on the 15 steps leading from the court of the Jews, the Israelites, and the court of the women. 2 priests stood at the upper gate, which leads down from the court of the Israelites to the court of women, with 2 trumpets in the hands. At the sound of the crow, they blew a tekiah, a teruah, and a tekiah. When they reached the 10th step, they again blew a tekiah, teruah, and tekiah. When they reached the court, they again blew it. Then they went until they reached the gate that leads out to the east. When they reached that gate, they turned their faces towards the west, meaning facing the sanctuary. They turned around. Rabbi Judah said they used to repeat the words, "We belong to God and our eyes are turned to God." It was related of old Hillel that he was rejoicing with the joy of the water drawing. He used to say, "Where I love to be, that's where my legs carry me." And the Holy One, blessed be, he says, "If you come to my house, I will come to your house. And if you don't come to my house, neither will I come to yours." It was related of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel that when he was rejoicing with the joy of the water drawing, he would take 8 burning torches in one hand and toss them upwards. He tossed one and caught one, meaning he was like juggling, in other words, and never did one touch the other. Now, isn't this a tremendous juggling act? Well, I don't know if first of all, maybe you saw juggling, I'm sure, but I've talked to jugglers about this, because I said, it says in the Gemara about this rabbi, he was juggling 8 burning torches. What do you think of that, such a feat? And they said, well, that would be almost a record, because 5 is really good in juggling profession. This is what the jugglers tell me. I'm no juggler myself, but the jugglers have said that 5 is really something. To do 8 burning torches and do it for a while, it's one long feat. And so you can imagine, again, that everybody would participate into this happiness. So this is the climate in Jerusalem. Well, together with this, like we said, and you have to remember again that nowadays we're more like city slickers in America. Most people aren't on the farm. These are statistics. But in the olden days, and I'm talking thousands of years ago in the olden days again, especially in Israel, I'm sure around the world everywhere, they were more an agricultural society. So again, like I was saying, it's easy to imagine, if you're a farmer, it's harvest time, and you have a good harvest, automatically I think it's going to be just a happy time for you in any case. And that's why the Sukkot also celebrates the harvest, the festival of ingathering. Sukkot is the festival of ingathering. It is the time when the produce of the field, orchard, and vineyard is gathered in. The granary, threshing floors, and wine and olive presses are full to capacity. Weeks and months of toil and sweat put into the soil have finally been amply rewarded. The farmer feels happy and elated. No wonder Sukkot is the season of rejoicing. At such a time of material success, there is the danger of man, quote, waxing fat and kicking, forsaking God his maker. Finding his work so successfully rewarded, he may think that my power and the strength of my hand have made me all this wealth. There's also the danger of his thinking that to work and amass a fortune is the whole purpose of life, forgetting that there are greater and higher values in life, spiritual values. Lest the Jew forget his real purpose in life, the Almighty in his infinite wisdom and loving kindness bade us leave our comfortable homes and dwell in a frail sukkah for 7 days. The sukkah reminds us that we rely on the Almighty for protection, for the sukkah is no fortress, not even providing a solid roof over our heads. It reminds us also that life on this earth is but a temporary dwelling. The 7 days of Sukkot each represent a decade of life, 70 years in all, the human lifespan on this earth. The short lifespan should be considered only as a period of preparation for the everlasting life that comes after life on this earth. A life where material wealth does not count, where only spiritual wealth counts. The stores of grain, wine, and oil must be left behind, while only the stores of Torah, the mitzvahs, and the good deeds can be taken along and put to good advantage in the everlasting life. This is also one of the reasons why it is customary in some congregations to read the book of Ecclesiastics, which in Hebrew is called Koheles, during this festival of Sukkot. Some congregations is read during the intermediate Sabbath. Sukkot, though, is the festival of ingathering in a deeper sense. It teaches us to gather, retain, and store the religious experience and spiritual uplift which we have acquired during the many and varied festivals, tefillos, prayers, and mitzvahs of the month of Tishrei, so that we can draw upon these rich stores throughout the whole year to come. Then I have a super-duper beautiful story, which I'm sure you'll all are going to like. Now, we talked about the citron before, which is one of the 4 species you hold on Sukkot. And here's a story that happened a few hundred years ago, and it's called an esrog. From the esrog is a citron, so let's get that right. The esrog from the Garden of Eden. It was the first day of Sukkot, and all the congregations in the shul, the synagogue of Rabbi Elimelech of Lizensk, were in a festive mood. One could feel the Yom Tov, the holiday spirit in the atmosphere. As Rabbi Elimelech stood at the Amud, at the platform, and began reciting the Hallel, the prayers of praising, all eyes turned upon him. There was something unusual in the manner of this Sukkot. Why did he stop so suddenly in the middle of his swing as he held the esrog and his lulav of the palm branch in his hands to sniff the air? And why did he not go through the service in his usual leisurely manner? It was evident that something was on his mind, something rather exciting by the look on his radiant countenance. The minute the davening was over, Rabbi Elimelech hurried to where his brother, Rabbi Zusha, who had come to spend Yom Tov, the holiday, with him, was standing and said to him eagerly, "Come and help me find this esrog which is permeating the whole synagogue with the fragrance of the Garden of Eden." So together they went from person to person until they reached the far corner of the synagogue, where a quiet-looking individual was standing, obviously engrossed in his own thoughts. "This is the one," called out Rabbi Elimelech delightfully. "Please, dear friend, tell me, who are you and where you obtained this wonderful esrog?" The man, looking somewhat startled and bewildered at this unexpected question, replied rather slowly, carefully choosing his words, "With all due respect to you, Rabbi, it is quite a story. Do you wish to sit down and listen to it all?" "Most certainly I do," answered Rabbi Elimelech emphatically. "I'm sure it will be a story worth hearing." "My name," began the quiet-looking man, "is Uri, and I come from Strelitsk. I have always regarded esrog benching, of saying the blessing on the esrog, as one of my favorite mitzvahs commandments. So although I am a poor man, could normally not afford to buy an esrog, according to my desire, my young wife, who agrees with me as to its importance, helped me by hiring herself out as a cook. Thus she is independent of my financial help from me, and I can use my own earnings for spiritual matters. I am employed as a Malamed teacher in the village of Yanev, which is not far from my native town. One half of my earnings I use for our needs, and with the other half I buy an esrog in Lemberg. But in order not to spend any money on the journey, I usually go on foot. This year, during the 10 days of repentance between the New Year's and the high holidays, I was making my way on foot as usual, with 50 gulden in my wallet with which to buy an esrog. When on the road to Lemberg, I passed through a forest and stopped at a wayside inn to have a rest. It was time for mincha, so I stood in a corner and davened, prayed the afternoon service. I was in the middle of Shemona Esrei when I heard a terrible sound of moaning and groaning as one of in great anguish. I hurriedly furnished my davening so that I could find out what was the trouble and if I could help in any way. As I turned towards the man who was in obvious distress, I beheld a most unusual and rough-looking person, dressed in peasant garb with a whip in his hands, pouring out his trouble in the innkeeper at the bar. From the somewhat confused story between his sobs, I managed to gather that the man with the whip was a poor Jew who earned his living as a balagola, owner of a carriage. He had a wife and several children and barely managed to earn enough to make ends meet. And now a terrible calamity had befallen him. His horse, without which he could do nothing, had suddenly collapsed in the forest not far from the inn, just lay there unable to get up. I could not bear to see the man's despair and tried to encourage him by telling him that he must not forget that there is a God above who could help him in the trouble, however serious it seemed to him. I'll sell you another horse for 50 gulden, although I assure you it is worth at least 80, but just to help you out in your difficulty, the innkeeper was saying to the carriage driver. Well, I haven't even 50 cents, and he tells me I can buy a horse for 50 gulden, the man said bitterly. I felt I could not keep the money I had with me for an esrog, and here was a man in such desperate plight that his very life and that of his family depended upon him getting a horse. So I said to the innkeeper, "Tell me, what is the lowest price you would take for your horse?" The innkeeper turned to me in surprise. "If you pay me cash down, well, I'll take 45 gulden, but absolutely not a cent less. I'm selling my horses at a loss as it is." I immediately took out my wallet and handed him a 45 gulden, the balagola looking on, his eyes nearly bulging out of their sockets in astonishment. He was just speechless with relief, and his joy was absolutely indescribable. Now you see that the Almighty can help you, even when the position appears to you to be entirely hopeless. I said to him as he hurried off with the innkeeper to harness the newly brought horse to his forsaken cart tied to the stricken horse in the forest. As soon as they went off, I hurriedly got my few things together and disappeared, as I did not want to be embarrassed by the thanks of the grateful carriage driver. I eventually reached Lemberg with the remaining 5 gulden in my pocket, and naturally had to content myself with buying a very ordinary-looking but kosher esrog. My original intention had to spend 50 gulden for an esrog, as I do every year, but as I heard, I decided that the need of the balagola, that carriage driver, for a horse was greater than my need for an exceptional esrog. Usually my esrog was the best in Yanev, and everyone used to come and bench and say a blessing with it. But this year I was ashamed to return home with such a poor-looking specimen. So my wife agreed that I could come here to Lizensk where nobody knew me. "But my dear Rabbi Uri," cried out Rabbi Elimelech, now that the former had finished his story, "yours is indeed an exceptional esrog. Now I realize why your esrog has the fragrance of the Garden of Eden in its perfume. Let me tell you the sequel to your story. The balagola, your carriage driver, whom you say thought about his unexpected good fortune, he decided that you must have been none other than the prophet Elijah, whom the Almighty had sent down to earth in the form of a man in order to help him in his desperation. Having come to this conclusion, the happy carriage driver looked for a way of expressing his gratitude to the Almighty. But the poor man knew not a Hebrew word, nor could he say any prayers. He racked his simple brain for the best way of thanksgiving. Suddenly his face lit up. He took his whip and lashed it into the air with all his might, crying out with all his being, "Oh, dear Father in heaven, I love you very much. What can I do to convince you of my love for you? Let me crack my whip for you as a sign that I love you." Saying which, the carriage driver cracked his whip in the air 3 times. On the eve of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, the Almighty above was seated on a seat of judgment, listening to the first prayers of the Day of Atonement. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of the Berdichev was acting as a counsel for defense on behalf of his fellow Jews, was pushing a wagon full of Jewish mitzvahs, good deeds, to the gates of heaven. When the Satan, the accusing angel, appeared and obstructed his path with piles of Jewish sins, so that Rabbi Levi Yitzchak just got stuck there. My brother Reb Zusha and I added our strength to help him move his wagon forward, but all in vain. Even our combined efforts proved fruitless. Suddenly, there was the sound of the cracking of a whip which rent the air, causing a blinding ray of light to appear, lighting up the whole universe right up to the very heavens. There we saw the angels and all the righteous sitting in a circle singing God's praises. On hearing the carriage driver's words as he cracked his whip in ecstasies, they responded, "Happy is the king who is thus praised." All at once the angel Michael appeared leading a horse, followed by the carriage driver with whip in hand. The angel Michael harnessed this horse to the wagon of mitzvahs, to the good deeds, and the carriage driver cracked his whip. Suddenly the wagon gave a lurch forward, flattened out the Jewish sins which had been obstructing the way, and drove it smoothly and easily right up to the throne of honor. There the King of Kings received them most graciously, and rising from a seat of judgment, went over and seated himself on the seat of mercy. A happy new year was assured. And now, dear Rabbi Uri, you concluded, Rabbi Melech, you see that all this came about through your noble action. Go home and be a leader in Israel, for you have proved your worthiness, and you shall carry with you the approval of the heavenly court. But before you go, permit me to hold this wonderful estrog of yours and praise the Almighty with it. It's a beautiful estrog story. Where I told you at the time it was a super beautiful story, and it just shows you that it's not exactly how much money or what you're spending on things. Is the kavanah from the heart, how much you're feeling, how much you have kavanah. It means intention of doing the right thing with the things that you have. And that's why I think one of the more important ideas of these holidays are, there's a lot of symbolism, and of course they're very, very important. The Succos we mentioned to review again, the hut to sit in there for 7 days, the lulav and esrog holding the 4 species in your hand and then going to the temple. But on the other hand, lots in the heart. But it has to have kavanah. It can't just go through the road and doing the things that are prescribed. A person has to remember that he has to, a man and a woman, of course, and children, that be educated in this, that the intention of when a person does something right has to be the proper intention also. So I think this is in general the conclusion of the idea of Sukkot, that we can all take a lesson from it. The harvest time, that we're thankful. Maybe it's the winter time and we're getting a little bit insecure with the winter, but we all know that the Almighty has helped us through the past and will guide us through the future. And with that, we should always feel secure and happy at the special time of Sukkot and the Jewish holiday. Thank you very much. Shalom. Welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Delmar Chabad Center, and today we have a very special guest straight from Brooklyn, New York, Yehuda Freeman, together with his son Schneer. Welcome to the Jewish View.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Now, Yehuda Freeman was here last year in the Capital District playing at the SUNY State University of New York with his family band for all the students there, and also at the Albany JCC. And this year he's here again by common consent at the SUNY, that they all loved you. We had hundreds of Jewish kids lined up in the middle of Campus Center. It was beautiful. And together you're going to come with your family band again, and we have at least one representative in the second segment of our show. We'll show a few more members of the family band. And Yehuda, how did you get into the music business in Brooklyn with the family?
Well, I was going to Chabad Yeshiva. I was originally from Winnipeg, Canada, and I met a Lubavitcher there, the Shliach, like yourself, I guess. And he got me interested in Yiddishkeit. And from there I went to yeshiva, and I was playing my guitar in the yeshiva, and I started a band in the yeshiva.
But you had musical experience before?
Yeah, I was very heavy into rock and roll and folk and jazz and all kinds of music.
What instruments did you play?
Guitar mostly, and writing songs is my favorite thing. I'm not a great guitarist. I like to write songs. You know, one of those chord type guys.
So you have many songs. What have you been playing?
Oh yeah, I'm writing tons of songs. I used to write, typical rock songs and things like that, but since I got into Yiddishkeit, I'm finding all I can write about is Mashiach, and because Mashiach's coming and he's going to save everybody, so what else is there to hope for, a lousy love affair? I'm tired of those, right? So.
And you got your whole band. That's very unique. It's one thing to get into the music and do your own thing, but that you actually brought your whole family into the music business.
Well, it got very complicated as I got married, and I have a job as a computer programmer, and I'm supposed to learn Torah every night. So as my kids got older, I found it difficult to learn with them and do all three. So I started playing music with them,
And you taught your children music yourself?
No, I have teachers for them, different teachers.
And each one plays a different instrument, so you can make a whole...
Right, pardon me, I do teach the Shnir here. Here's how I teach him. I go like this. And he'll go like that.
So harmonica, that's good over here. So what's the different musicians you have, different instruments that are played by your family?
Yes, my daughter plays bass, keyboards. She's really a classical pianist. Maybe she'll be on later. And she's great classical, but the band doesn't need that. And my son, he's a lead pianist, and he plays harmonica, and my other son, Yisroel, plays drums. The way it started, I started them all on piano. And Yisroel's teacher quit piano. He didn't want to teach him piano. He didn't think he had it in him. So I found a drum teacher, and he turns out he's the best student in his school. He's got it. Well, he can do 4 beats with 4 arms and legs. It's incredible. He's only 10 years old.
So you all work together. It's interesting. You gel together as one unit over here. All right, Shnir, you like playing the harmonica? That's your major instrument?
Yes.
You play any other instruments beside the harmonica? Or you like the harmonica?
Yeah.
And your father's a good teacher?
Excellent.
Good to hear, especially your father sitting right next to you.
How much do I owe you for that?
You're in school in Brooklyn. Do you take, is there just...
I'm not in school in Brooklyn. I go to Ocean Parkway.
Ocean Parkway, well that is part of Brooklyn over here. But this Ocean Parkway Yeshiva, and they don't give music lessons there, so you actually, the lessons to music is actually after school by your father.
Sometimes I don't practice.
You have any friends that play with you, or just with your family?
It's just me and my family.
You like playing in a band?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
It gets boring after a while. I hope you have a good time here in the Capital District, because people are expecting you, and like we say, we have a good program with the college kids, like especially the harmonica. Remember last year the harmonica had some special kick for the, a small kid playing the harmonica was very good for the college kids, and then we have for families at Schenectady JCC, Jewish Community Center, and all the families like it too. The kids like seeing kids perform also. Right. Kids always seeing adults perform all the time, and hear that they get to see, so speak their peers, seeing what they can be on stage and performing also.
Right. This year we have my 2 twins they're just making their debut. They don't do anything yet, really. They're just sort of in there, though. They're going to introduce us.
All right, so we get them into the music business at an early age.
They can blow shofar.
How old are they, your twins?
6 now.
Oh, so not too young to start them off.
No.
In the summer they were they were fun.
You have any tapes that, like you say, how many tapes have you been produced already? You said you make so many songs.
I made a few of my own before I met my kids, and then we have one tape on the market. We're working on our second tape right now. But quite honestly, we like to get a real record company instead of making your own tape and selling it at shows. It's fun, but we like to go
even marketing,
get a hit record or something like that.
There's enough business out there with the Jewish music. I mean, so
no, we want to get a hit record on the charts. We have something to say that means something about Mashiach and that's what people need to hear. And it's there's no reason why they shouldn't.
Well, that's my feeling. It's a hard thing to market, though. Maybe that's.
Well, nobody seems to be. They don't understand. They don't realize the importance of it, or they don't believe it. So it's hard to convince them. But I'm working on it.
All right. So everybody had their small beginnings. There's always family bands that were always famous throughout, the United States, even when we were kids, and so it'll take off. It's something unique for the most part.
Let's hope.
There's only a few, and people like those things over here. So you enjoy playing the music. You say computer program is really your major occupation. How much?
Well, as musicians say, that's my day gig. My 9 to 5. How many concerts do we do?
Yeah.
In a year? Or well, we're seasonal. Mostly we play Jewish holidays. Like this is Succos, so yesterday we did 3 shows, 2 in Manhattan and 1 in Crown Heights. And we get a lot of shows in Sukkot, then Hanukkah, and Purim, and Pesach. That's
people like it for the holiday program.
Yeah, because also all my kids they're great students. They get the honor roll scholarship.
So it shouldn't interfere with their studies.
Right. I try to keep the music second to that.
And I mean, besides the music part of it and the learning of it, and this is all part of their education also.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We learn all about. You learn a lot from a song. A song can change your whole, and it's family togetherness in a way. Doing something with your family. Like instead of going out to a circus and blowing your whole week's pay, you go out and you make twice as much.
And
you're the circus.
Well, it's important that entertainment also, of course, is an important means of bringing, like you say, a message and showing that Jewish kids, you still have this kind of idea. What I'm bringing out is, my name is Asher Lev. People know the book from Chaim Potek that maybe a religious Jewish kid cannot have the experience of, like for example, his book was about art that would be banned, and there you are, you just have your religious quote-unquote studies, and a person isn't able to nourish themselves with extracurricular activities.
Right.
And here you're showing, hey, listen, you're chassid with the black beard, the black hat and the beard, and on the other hand, your kids are learning all about music. So that in itself is a message in itself for people, that you don't have to give up. Like you say, you have music before, well, you have music now. It's just, you don't really have to give up your interest in the things that you really like.
No, but it is difficult. Like yesterday at one of the shows, a guy comes up to me and he says, "You're from out of town." I said, "What do you mean, my accent?" He said, "Yeah, I know that, but there's no one in New York who would do what you do." In other words, everybody who's frum in New York is extremely frum, and what I do is somewhat radical. But they said, the Torah says you should use all your talents to serve God, and that's what I try to do. And
I think it's very important that you do that. Like I say, it's important that people should know. And there's nothing, like you say, wrong. If anything, there's so much right there. It's a very good means to reach people with music.
Right.
And I think that's important for, like you say, we had hundreds of people go give a lecture about, the Bible or something to college students, and if 5 students show up, you're very happy.
Right.
And here we had hundreds of students show up, and I think that's a very big means of reaching out to people. No, it's very good work, and we always like having you when this is the second. Maybe we'll have to have an annual event over here in the Capital District Sukkot time. But it's important for the people here that they see good Jewish music. And we aren't in New York City, and in Albany you don't have that many Jewish events that people, like you say, can bring with their family or bring with themselves, and to be entertained Jewishly, without something that their children could also be part of it. Not something maybe about the Holocaust. It's something not for children. But here is something that everybody can relate to.
I hope so.
Shneur, you like entertaining people, making people happy? It's an important mitzvah. That's a big mitzvah, isn't it?
Yeah.
Making people happy and dancing, especially on the holidays. The holidays, that's even a bigger mitzvah than the normal. Well, I want to thank you, Yehuda, and we're tell everybody that to stay tuned for the second segment of the show, because then we're going to see your wife, Chai Edel, and also your daughter, and Chana, and we're going to talk to them about what it means to be in the family band.
Okay.
So we'll bid you adieu, and just stay tuned for the second segment of the show.
Okay.
We now have with us the second half of the band, or another segment, I should say, because there are still a few members that we don't have here. Chai Edel Freeman, Yehuda Freeman's wife, and her daughter, Chana.
Oh.
Welcome to the Jewish View.
Thank you.
Well, now we have the woman's side of the story over here. We can understand with the woman's point of view, their female point of view, of what it means to have a band. And like Yehuda told us before a few minutes ago, that it's fairly unique to have a Jewish band. It's probably unique for anybody to have a family band, but especially a Jewish band from New York. How did you feel about when he said, hey, I want to get the kids involved? One thing, I guess you knew he was a guitarist when you married him, because that was his profession when he was single. But then he said, hey, I want to get the kids involved. What was your feelings about that?
Well, it wasn't really Yehuda that really started the band. My first son, Chani's my first child, but my first son, my second child, was very musical. And we gave him lessons, and he just started playing. And then he said, you know, Tat, how about if we play together? So they started playing together. And then they got one show, and they were really good. And then it really sort of clicked, like, this is really a good thing. And they started, and they kept doing it. Then more children grew up, and they started taking lessons and joined slowly. And they really became very, very tight as not just as a musical group, but as a family, because it was really more than a unifying factor. It was a real love that they all share together.
Yeah, honey. As the older daughter, and we know already that you played the piano, we were told about that. So you enjoy playing in the band, or would maybe you be going to probably your first love is classic music?
No, I don't know. Well, I've been taking classical and it's lots of fun, but to be in a band, it's like unique and it's different, and all my friends think that, like, oh, like, you're so different. Like, no family has a band together, especially a girl in it with their brothers, you know. It's like very different, you know. And so I like it, and it's fun because you go traveling around, you do lots of adventures and everything. It's lots of fun.
It's excellent. You know, that, again, as we were talking to Yehuda, that people have such a misconception about religious Jewish people and Orthodox Hasidic life, and here they are that, you know, that they shouldn't be art, the music is a no-no, and they shouldn't play the instruments. And here, like I say, the message itself is just that you come on and here, and people can explore their talents, and no one's stifling any talents. And you want to play, and you want to write music, and you want to get together and entertain people. It's not only perfectly accepted, but it's obviously very admirable to do that.
It's sort of necessary. I see that when they really not only are bored, but they really want to do something, they all sit down at their instruments and they really come up with lots of nice things. For Chana Esther, it's a little different because being a girl and being a religious girl, it's not so accepted. So there are many times that, well, first of all, she can't sing. So that's...
Well, I used to sing.
Right, when she was younger, she used to sing, but now that she's older, she can't. She doesn't sing live. And there are many times that we put her behind a partition, which is called a mechitza, so that people don't see her. So that was a little hard for her, you know, growing
It wasn't
up.
hard for me.
No? To
Everybody
accept,
thinks
but
it
just...
is, so they keep telling me, but
Right.
I don't care. I
Right,
don't mind.
she's really a great kid. So that was the changes that she had to go through. So it was a real learning lesson also. It's not just, we learned mitzvahs through it. Girls, men don't hear women sing. I mean, it was a growing experience too.
But you're entertaining people, like I say, and that must be a very heartwarming experience, because comes the holidays, come the Yom Tovim,
Oh, yeah.
the Jewish holidays, and it's something you reach. We were saying before to Yehuda that you reach people that you couldn't reach otherwise.
What do
Yeah.
you mean?
I mean, like I say, you go to campus, so you say learn something, or the rabbi, you're going to want to do a mitzvah with anybody. Who's going to come? Truthfully, 5, 10 people show up to do a mitzvah. And if you say, hey, there's music and a live band, Yeah, you get
People
hundreds of
flock.
people. You get hundreds of people, and like the holidays, it's really a mitzvah in its own right. Just to be happy on, let's say, a holiday of Sukkot or any other holiday in its own right. If they just hear music and are happy and seeing a Jewish band, I mean, there's just so many things that they can understand. Like I say, sing a Jewish band, saying, "Hey, maybe that could be Jewish," but a lot of people say, "I don't want to give up this. I don't want to give up that. So I guess it's not for me." And say, "Hey, you give up nothing over here. Here's a Jewish band, and they don't have to give up anything." And like I say, they're happy in their own right. So, even just being happy is an accomplishment.
It's a very big turn on for people when they see children um, playing the instruments and singing. The normal question is, are they really doing it? Like most people stand up and look at the side and see, is this really computerized? Or are they really doing it? So it's a very amazing thing to see. And the other thing is, most of the lyrics Yehuda himself writes, and he's an excellent lyricist. And people are really learning things out there. He has songs for Jewish people, songs for non-Jewish people. He's teaching them mitzvahs, he's teaching them about the holidays, and he's really getting message across that by osmosis, really, they do realize that they are learning something. So the song finishes and they said, "Boy, I never really knew that before." So it's a learning experience for everyone.
You're right. I know, like the song, and everybody knows the song "Dreidel, Dreidel, Dreidel," made it out of clay.
Mm-hmm.
And then you say about the lulav, and men, where maybe your regular kid will know about, okay, Hanukkah is time for dreidel,
Right.
but will they know a lulav is really fitting for the sukkahs, or at least they'll remember it with a tune in the mind that they'll remember that, hey, there's a mitzvah on sukkahs, not just Hanukkah menorah or Hanukkah dreidel, but there is a holiday sukkahs. How many people you talk to? Rosh Hashanah I know, Hanukkah I know, Passover I know. Hey, there's other things in the Jewish calendar, and like I say, you're right. People learn by that. That's when you get to little grammar school kids, and you sing songs. That's how they remember things. So, I guess we're all a little bit of kids by heart, and the song it just sits in the mind better. People enjoy it better.
Especially now with Mashiach, and he has so many nice new things about Mashiach that he tells all the different mitzvahs.
Didn't have to be done. Well, like I say, it's something that you could use, like you were saying before, really lyrics in a normal song, and out there in the pop parade is really just very base and surely not educational. And here, using music as an entertainment and as educational, and that's something very fitting over here. Just you get a wider audience. It's hard to sometimes move out the message to, of course, the Jewish audiences, but still even that. Get your regular Jewish audiences, but
Yehuda is very versatile. He's made a family show, a campus show, a senior citizens show, a Yiddish show. I mean, he's very versatile in terms of things he can do with the band.
That's very good. You participate in the band, or are you the manager of the band in any way?
Well, I'm basically the manager and the costume designer. The cook. No, I mean,
Well, they
the
need to too,
roadie.
don't they?
Yeah, everything else that goes into it,
We're our own movies. You're not really.
basically. But
Maybe, yeah.
where I try and make different contacts and advertise and do the PR.
No, it's important. Just seeing behind the scenes and gelling it together. That's why I say, even in everything, it's just the one behind everything. Like I say immediately, if you'd be opposed to having your kids play, there wouldn't be a band altogether. I mean, just
Well, I mean,
there's always
it's for me, it gives me a time that I finished with them. When they come home from school, Yehuda's not home. I'm there with them. I'm giving them their food, doing their homework, helping them a bit. Then Yehuda comes home, he does his part with them. He learns with them. When all the schoolwork is finished, then they will sit down for an hour. They play, and then they go to sleep. So the day just goes like that.
Yeah, well, that's extracurricular activities are good for discipline in its own right. And music in itself is just appreciation, but children learning music, and like you say, we were talking about before, is just that there's so much about sibling rivalries, and you talk about it just goes into family dynamics, and there's so many books and articles always written about it. And here, working together and playing together, you really probably have the biggest cure. You're always talking. educators think, how should we work it out and talk it over and
Mhm.
work it out. But you have to work it out. You know, you depend on people for things and
very
you work
true.
together.
I mean, Yehuda watches the kids and he sees what they're into and what they want to do. Also, it's not like he just says, okay, guys, I wrote a new song and this is the way it goes. It's not like that. He watches them. He sees the things they're into. You'll see some of our new music coming up on this show. And it's a real back and forth, and everybody's opinion is respected.
It's important. So the kids have a little bit of a say-so into the music
Oh,
also?
lots so, yeah.
It is interesting. And let the kids participate, not
Mhm,
just think,
right.
commanding them, this
Exactly.
is what you're singing, this is your point over here. I think it's important to know that over here for kids also. Would you mind if they grow up and be musicians themselves? I mean, what's the
Well, I
ultimate
know
goal?
that it'll always be something that they will have. It's always going to be something that they're going to remember. And they might be. They're all really great already, so they might really be top musicians.
It's
It's
important,
up to, it's really up to them. Yehuda lets it flow the way they feel. And it'll go that way. I mean, they're still young. As they get older, they're going to want to do what they want to do. Either they'll stay with it or we'll make new bands or we won't. But right now, everybody's opinion is respected.
Honey, you said before, of course, you like doing music. You see in the future you look continuing on, and have any aspirations in the future?
I don't know. I gotta think about that.
Yeah, too young still over here. The future will come, but that's important that you learned and whatever. Like you say, it stays with you. Whatever it is. Now, I hate to tell you, if I had a few years of music lessons myself, I probably can't even remember anything. So don't take an example from me. But no, it is appreciating music is important. And again, it goes hand in hand. People should know that. In a Hasidic life, I know there is a statement that if you can't appreciate like a song, a nigun, which is a song in Hebrew, that you really can't be a chassid, because the idea to achieve higher spiritual heights, a person needs an ear for music. Music does take a person to a higher plane. Of course, it can go both ways. Music is powerful, and like we said, people in the world could use it as a vain idea, but on the other hand, if it's used in the proper way, then it could take a person to higher heights, and not only spiritual, but even just the most educational and entertaining advantages for a person to learn and to see hey, there's something in Judaism, and they can learn a tune well that also. I just from previous years, I mean, maybe the audience it hasn't, of course, seen. Of course, they're invited to come, but it's just like campus kids it's hard to get them, and you say Judaism, I know it, I went through Hebrew school, I want to hear about it, and the people from the world, and just they came out in droves and just totally entertained and totally happy. That
And
itself
singing
is like,
Mashiach.
yeah, it's a mitzvah. It's the highest regard for Jewish things, and and just all the kudos to you and your family that you worked on it, and you can achieve something. And it's good for everybody. It's good for your family, and it's good for the Jewish people in general. And people see that this is, something educational and something good, that the Orthodox Jewish people can be versatile in their achievements, and they themselves could join along. They don't have to give up their music, and they don't have to give up their art, and they don't have to give up whatever they think that is very important to them. They can just bring it along with them and not give it up.
Not only that, also that families can really find a point to unify on. You don't have to just say, oh, I'll occupy the kids and I'll give them a computer and I'll send them out to karate lessons and I'll send them out to music lessons. Just send them out baseball, tennis. There is a unifying factor that families can get together and find that positive point and grow with it.
All right, very good. I want to thank you, and since your husband's not on the show now, I'm going to thank your husband. You'll give him the regards of coming on the show. You have a very busy schedule. Like I say, a few concerts here in Albany, and it's the middle of the holidays. And second of all, you'd like to see what the Capital District has to offer. But you're taking out your time to be with us in the Jewish View, you and your children. And I want to thank you very much for entertaining the Capital District and being on the Jewish View.
Thank you also.
Shalom. Welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Delmar Chabad Center, and today we're going to take a look at biblical interpretation. Now this is going to be very interesting. It's not going to be dry at all, and I'm going to show you a little bit of the rabbinical depth when they look into the Bible. Now many people are going to say, for example, we're going to take it right from the start, which is of course the creation, and people are going to say, well, it's a very simplistic story, and we're going to get into the concept of course creationism versus evolutionism, and we're going to have to look a little bit more in depth in creation. Truth of the matter is, if you read it clearly, you read it straight, it's one chapter, it looks very, very simplistic. Go light, let there be light. But that shouldn't put you off. It shouldn't make you realize that everything is so totally simplistic, very unscientific, because that's not true at all. And we're going to delve into a little bit, and I always say little bit when we're learning, because that's all as much as anybody could really understand. And also, I want to impress upon you that there is so much depth there. Of course, like I say, no one can learn as much depth, and surely on a limited show as we have, we surely cannot get into a whole in-depth study of what's happening in the rabbinical literature. But just a little bit, what we're here for is to educate and to whet your tongue and to tell you and teach you a little bit of what is out there and what has an interpretation. So without further ado, we're going to take this book, and I have Encyclopedia Rabbinical Talmud, and this, I just want to show you how thick it really is in little print. It's a tremendous book from Menachem Kasher, but on the other hand, don't even think this is everything. There's just so much to talk about. There's so much to deal with and so much to uncover, really, for the most part. All scientific and all knowledge are contained in quote-unquote these simplistic words, because really, like I'm saying, they're not simple at all. That's the beauty of the Torah. Yes, we can teach the same stories to a nursery school kid, and they could understand it, but on the other hand, the greatest genius can look into this and also get the deepest secrets of the universe inside there also. So this is what we're trying to at least come across and bring a few of these ideas home. Of course, the first sentence is, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Gets seemingly simplistic, but I'm going to give over a few midrashim. Now the medrash was written about 2,000 years ago. Not anew, but it was given over from time immemorial, and finally was written down. Some people think, well, where did they know about it 2,000 years ago? For example, what happened with Abraham? Well, Abraham lived 3,000, 4,000 years ago. How did they know from 2,000 years ago? If I would tell you, oh, I have news stories about Columbus, how am I supposed to know? I lived 500 years after Columbus. I'm going to know about news stories, but no one else knew them. I'm supposed to come up with stories 500 years later. But that's what I'm saying. To answer this idea that this was always handed down from one generation to the other, and from this that we can know that what the original between the lines of the stories are. Now, like I say, between the line is almost infinite knowledge between these, again, simplistic quote-unquote stories. A heretic asked Rabbi Akiva, who created the world? The sage answered, God. Well, give me clear proof, he demanded. Akiva rejoined, you come tomorrow. When he came the next day, the sage asked him what he was wearing. Well, a garment. And who made it? Akiva persisted. A weaver, was the answer. I do not believe me. Give me clear proof. But you know what a garment is? But you do not know that a garment is made by a weaver? Well, I have to tell you that it comes from a factory. And you know that God has created the world, the sage retorted. When he took his leave, Akiva's disciples asked him, what is the incontestable proof? My sons, the sage replied, just as a house implies a builder, a dress a weaver, a door a carpenter, so the world proclaims God who created it. I cannot answer you enough that, I mean, maybe we're not using scientific words, and we can. And I'm going to try to get some scientists into the show here and try to express some ideas from a scientific viewpoint, but let it not be a reason for not to understand these midrashic rabbinical ideas. they may not be said in scientific words, and maybe they're not being said in the most like maybe scholarly language, but again, the simple proofs and truths are really there. Simply like this, if someone would show you, and sometimes I do it to my children, there's houses being built, and so we walk around and we see piles of lumber, and the kids don't see it. Maybe it's a Saturday walk and Shabbos walk, and the people, the workers and the carpenters have already gone home. So, I even tease them a little bit. So I say, they don't look at that wood. I says, oh yeah, you see a wind came and blew this pile of those trees and made them into a pile of logs, cut them down. And it's even a little kid says, well, now this is ridiculous. What are you telling me, this kind of baloney? So I says, well, don't you see here? Here it's not even that complicated of a story. You're taking from a tree over there and then a piece of wood. It's almost the same thing. And everybody knows, even the most simple mind understands that just a wind couldn't blow and make that full of lumber. It's the most ridiculous thing anybody ever heard of. So too here also, if we would only look at the world around us, and now we're not talking about any specific thing because we can talk about anything. A person in biology, a doctor, could look at the human body, the way it functions, how intricate it really is. Again, maybe it'd be better to hear it from a person in that field, and the rabbi always, there's a rabbinical comment, but like I say, you don't have to be a doctor to understand how complicated the body is. You don't have to be a builder or construction person to understand how a building just couldn't get there by themselves. And in anything like that in the world, a person could look out in nature and see at the fall season how the leaves fall off the tree, and then in spring again it rejuvenates. A person doesn't have to be a genius. You don't have to be a scientist to realize that these things are complicated in their own rights. You need a grammar school or high school level of sciences all to understand and to look into it and see how amazing the world is in every aspect of it. You're going to see that fell together by itself. That's what Rabbi Akiva is saying. That itself, that something's complicated, it was there. Something complicated doesn't fall together. Another little story, I hope you enjoy them, because I totally enjoy these stories, and most people do. But like I say, together with these stories, there's tremendous truths behind them also. The Roman Emperor Hadrian, now many of this, just a one little footnote of a historical content, is just like we did say, the Medrash and the Talmud together were written down, and I just say they weren't known, but 2,000 years ago they finally wrote them down, because, just like I was saying, historically, the Roman persecutions, it was forbidden to learn Torah, and they say, well, we cannot orally give over these stories anymore, or these ideas, because they're not allowing us to give them over. And even though maybe they had a little underground learning, but it surely wasn't the same. So he says, we better write it down, and this way, when you write it down, you know it's there. So many of the stories in the historical background of the Medrash and the Talmud deal with the Roman period, which most people know the Roman took over Israel, talking about 2,000 years ago, even though it was beforehand, but generally around 2,000 years ago, as we'll state. The Roman Emperor Hadrian asked Rabbi Joshua, has the world a master? So he replies, then the world ownerless? And who created heavens and the earth then? It was God. It says clearly right at the beginning. In the beginning, God created. Then why does he reveal himself twice a year so that God might see him and stand in awe of him? Let him show, here I am. The world could not endure his dazzling splendor, Hadrian was told. The scriptures writes, man cannot see him and live. I mean, for example, that there's another little bit of a story that maybe goes hand in hand with this. That same question, it says, if God's God, let him show him to me. I mean, if someone's around, let him write me a letter or something. Call me on the phone. So he says, why don't you look at the sun? Look at the sun. You go blind, you'll look at the sun. You're not allowed to look at the sun. He says, well, if you can't even look at the sun, how are you going to be amazed at looking at the Almighty? So this is the answer here also. He says that you cannot directly see the Almighty, but through your mind you can. You can learn and you can understand. And that you just have to have a little bit of a deeper insight. All right. Another little tidbit, which, like I say, is deep. The beginning God created. This reads literally, in the beginning created God. The act of creation is mentioned first because the creation testifies to the existence of the Creator. Thus, from the created man recognized the Creator, even as Job declared, out of my own flesh will I discern God. The very fact that I exist, a thing created, is proof of the existence of the Creator. Rabbi Pinchas and Rav, two rabbis, on the authority of Rabbi Joshua, the son of Rabbi Levi, quoting Rabbi Levi, said, a builder requires 6 materials: water, earth, wood, stones, laths, and iron. Even the rich who do not use laths still require a measuring rod, as we read, in the man's hand there was a measuring rod. Therefore, he first created 6 prerequisites. The first was his works of old, set up for everlasting, from the beginning, or in the earth and heavens. Therefore, that's what it reads, bara shes. Well, it's a play on words. And again, I'm footnoting many ideas over here. But the point is just that it's important to understand that the original Bible was written in Hebrew, of course. Now that people say, well, there's so many translations, and who needs the Hebrew, so to speak? Well, first of all, people, anybody in knowledge, and I'm not even talking about rabbinical people, I'm even talking about other clergymen and people I've known also that have told me that they teach in other ministries the Bible in the original Hebrew language. I'm not saying all, but I know many that do. And the simple reason is as follows, and it's a known thing, everybody says it, something's lost in the translation. We all know it about every other language, and surely it's the truth with the Hebrew in the Bible. So therefore, many of the play on words, the nuances, are plays on words, like teach a little bit of Hebrew, hopefully. I mean, we always try to bring in a few words to expand our understanding, and of course, like Hebrew language is also, of course, an intrinsic part of Judaism, Jewish education. We'll throw out a few more words here. The first word is bereshis. A B sound or a base in front of a word, a prefix, means in. In, reshis in the beginning. But he makes a play on words. He divides it into bora. If you can hear the nuances, I'll say it twice. Bereshis is the real word, and then it says borashes. I just put a little bit of a different emphasis on the words, but it means something else. It means he created 6. It means he created, he's saying here, 6 parts or 6 elements into part of the creation. This in the elements also we have, of course, the earth, the minerals. Again, we're not talking scientific language, and sometimes you have to put in your own nuances and semantics into these different words and ideas. Therefore, we're saying the earth, or I call it minerals, water, well, I think that's clear, air, so you want to call it hydrogen, you want to call it oxygen, you want to call it gases, and fire. So, like I say, sometimes the things that we say here may be different than what people understand, but you have to get a little bit difference in the nuances, a little bit difference in the ideas, and really it comes out to the same thing. We always say, we're bringing that out here also, I mean, we'd have to go through hours to have a full discussion in it about that true science, if it really is the truth, is not a contradiction to anything that Judaism has ever said, but just a complement to it. There's obviously such a leading statement to talk about for hours and hours, as I'm sure you know, but let's just throw it out, that truism, and like when we come up with things or we have other guests on the show, and we can bring that out also. All right, now many people hear about the Zohar. The Zohar literally means the Book of Splendor. It's the basis of Jewish mysticism. Many people call me up. It's interesting. People are into mysticism today. It's very fine and good. No problems with that. On the contrary, it's very good. And people many times call me up and they want to know about Jewish mysticism. They hear about other kinds of mysticism, and maybe they heard through a book or somewhere that there's also Jewish mysticism, and we'd like to find out about it. Probably that's a major subject people are interested in, I would even say, with not being scientific and statistical about it, but I know many people do call me, that I could tell you. So here is an excerpt from the Zohar about the creation. A little bit mystical, so if you're not the mystical leaning, hold on to your seats. It's not that bad either. In the beginning, God created. When the will of the king began to take effect, he engraved signs into the heavenly sphere that surrounded him. Within the most hidden recess, a dark flame issued from the mystery of the Ein Sof, the infinite, like a fog forming in the unformed, enclosing in the ring of that sphere neither white nor black, neither red nor green, of no color whatever. Only after this flame began to assume size and dimension did it produce radiant colors. From the innermost center of the flames sprang forth a well out of which colors issued and spread upon everything beneath, hidden the mysterious hiddenness of the Ein Sof, the Infinite One. The well broke through and yet did not break through the ether of the sphere. It could not be recognized at all until a hidden supernal point shone forth under the impact of the final breaking through. Beyond this point nothing can be known, therefore it is called Rashis, as we said, beginning, the first word out of the 10 by means of which the universe was created. Well, you want a little bit of mysticism, people call me up to say a little bit more mystical ideas. Here it is. To tell you the truth, it takes a lot of explaining, a little bit hard to explain in the other homiletic ideas that we're saying. Let me suffice it to say again that we try to be brief and go on to different ideas and throw out different ideas here in this Jewish view. We don't want to prolong on one idea. There is, of course, like I always say, more to talk about. But it's just like clearly that there was only one creator from the beginning. God is one. And afterwards, as he became, and they call in other Kabbalistic literature, Jewish mysticism, Tzimtzum, contracted this infinite pure light into different dimensions. My example that I always give to people is like a prism. At first it's clear, but then if you diffract the light, it turns into a rainbow in many colors. Well, it's the same thing. Again, everything is a good example in the world for higher ideas. At the beginning it was pure light, and then it brought down and like it diffracted into different spheros, they call it in Kabbalistic literature, illuminations, and therefore this way he's calling about different, then it finally broke up into many colors, because the colors go on to refer to these different aspects of godliness. Suffice it to say, if you're interested, you can always give me a ring, we can explain it more, but don't want to prolong on it specifically one idea here, but for the mystics in our audience, then we have something for them also. Right, this is a quote now from the Talmud, even though as we say always that the Talmud is law book, nevertheless we also say that and together integrated in the laws of the Talmud is the history of the Jewish people, and like we're going to see here, homiletics also. In the beginning, Reb Shimi stated not less than 10 scriptural verses should be read in the synagogue on the New Year's, mean Rosh Hashanah service. These proclaim the kingdomship, treat of remembrance, and deal with the shofar. Now, if we give it to the people who listen to the Jewish view, that we did talk about this when we were on Rosh Hashanah on the New Year's. But why 10? Why do you have to specifically talk about 10? And let me interject another idea here. I know I have to make so much footnotes to these ideas because they're throwing out new ideas, and they really have to be explained, and that's what you have me here for. You can't just read a book and understand it fully. You need some commentary and some teacher to take you through. And everything has a reason. Science, and any good scientist, a truthful scientist will always tell you, science tells you how things work. They do not tell you why things work. And that's a principle. You can take it right through any kind of scientific idea. This is where Jewish mysticism, Jewish direction takes off. they will tell you also the why. Maybe the how is, like I say, a little difficult. I'm going to say how to use your computer. You can't look in a rabbinical book, whatever have you. Maybe you need your scientific training for this. But the why is where Judaism takes off and where science doesn't even want to deal with the subject. So why 10? And why do you have the number 10? So anything is fair game, a fair question. Contrary to what people think that, it's just believe, and don't ask any questions. Very much on the contrary, as we constantly bring here, we always love questions. We love inquisitiveness because this is the beginning of knowledge. If you want to learn, if you have a question, we'll try to get you the answer. And Torah is like that also. We want you to learn and we want you to understand. And it says in the Ethics of the Father, a shy person cannot learn. Simply means if you're too shy to ask a question, you're never going to get your question answered. You don't have an answer, you're not going to learn anything. So we do like questions, and the Talmud itself is based on question, answer. Get this kind of idea, which is a little bit different than, like I say, and maybe in your secular studies, you didn't have this kind of formation. We had question, answer, as you do in rabbinical studies. But they ask, what do the 10 represent? Well, you have to have 10 statements for everything. Because the guy created the world in 10 utterances. I don't think that, you think, well, you're talking rabbinical language. Now let me explain to you something that's just so normal you don't even think about. Our numbering system, which is a little basis for everything that we're doing in scientific and just your checkbook, and literally everything you do, your money system, is the decimal system. That you're using decimal system, but with number of 10. 0 to 10, 10 to 100, everything is times 10. Why is that? Why did it come out that our whole system's on a basis of 10? So I don't know if you can find a good answer. Maybe I should leave you with some homework. But in any case, that if you can find a better answer, I'd like to know. There really isn't a good answer. And I'm telling you the answer, what Judaism has to say, because the world was based on 10. Because there's 10 statements that God created the world. There's 10 commandments. And that's why everything that flows in the world is made by 10. And if you want to get even a little bit more technical, which is, people are amazed at this, why do we have 10 fingers? Why do we have 10 toes? And the same idea. Why not 12? What's wrong with 12? Why not 8? And therefore, there is a reason, like I say, you go ask a doctor, they're not going to be able to tell you that. Guarantee you this. Again, the why isn't part of scientific. They'll tell you how it works, how many bones are in the hands, what the veins are in the hands. They could tell you all kinds of things. Like I say, it would take for hours to explain everything, how the hands work, the nervous system. Hours and hours. There's so much knowledge, I'm sure, about the hands. But why 10 fingers? Why did it happen to have to be 10? Don't ask questions. When it comes to scientists, you don't ask why. And that's where Judaism takes into the answer 10, because the world was created with 10 statements, and there's 10 commandments. The world was based on 10. Therefore, the human being, not just that he's another gorilla, that's not what we say, but as a godly creature, and as a human being, you look at yourself or a human being experience, and you see, well, that's what I am. I've made in God's image. That's why there's 10 fingers and 10 toes. So, hope we get some idea, but we have a few more stories. Listen to this. People like stories. A wealthy and pious old man of 70 years old, being childless, distributed his estates among scholars. Perhaps, said he, this will help me to share your lot in the hereafter. Straightway, God in his compassion blessed him with a son in his 70th year. When the child was 5 years old, his father took him to school, riding on his shoulders. With which book shall we commence? Asked he. The teacher answered, the book is Leviticus, the third book. Let him rather begin with Genesis, the beginning. Start with page 1. What kind of business? Suggested his father, because that contains a eulogy of God. The teacher did so. The narrative relates at length how the child was taken captive and brought to the royal palace. The Holy One, blessed be, afflicted the king with sickness. The medical book was miraculously turned into the book of Genesis. But no one could read it save this child whom the father had taught. In return for this, the king restored him to his parents and heaped great riches upon him. Commenting on this, the sages observed If he only learned only the book of Genesis was solely greatly rewarded, how much more so it teaches us on Torah or the Mishnah? How much more is there to learn? Well, again, this is an analogy of an idea that there's so much guidance, so much riches in learning, that the reward of the learning is almost, besides everything, besides that the reward is in the learning and the appreciation itself. The knowledge itself is an appreciation. And another beautiful idea, one who teaches a child the book of Genesis will have it accounted to him as if he engaged in the creation of the world. What you learn is what you become, and not just an idea of just the ideas, but in rabbinical language is actually you actually fulfill exactly what you do also. If you're learning about creation, it's as if you're making the creation. Well, people like these interesting ideas, so I'm going to continue with a few more stories. Solomon said, wisdom is as unattainable to a fool as corals. A fool flees at the very gate of the school. Kid's a fool and he doesn't want to go to school. What kind of business? For he asks, what will you give me to learn first? He is told, a table, and after that a scroll, and after that Genesis, and after that the Bible, and after that the 6 hours of the Mishnah, and after that the priestly law, and then the Medrash, and then the Talmud. Rabbanic saying, can I really master all that? There's so much learning. But the sensible man observes, I will study 2 laws today, 2 tomorrow, until I learn them all. So this is actually a very, very interesting idea. We're learning about, maybe you would have to read a whole book and having an idea and a whole seminar of how to learn and how to grow. And here we're telling you in one short story here on the Jewish View that here is rabbinical language is saying you take one step at a time. Don't look at the whole picture and look like it's so big and too impossible for you. You take one chunk at a time. And like I'm telling you, the psychologists will tell you this, seminars will tell you this. And here you have it right up front in rabbinical language. You take little by little, and then eventually it grows and it produces and more, and you actually attain your seemingly unattainable goal from the beginning. You take one step towards that direction. One more story and we'll call it a show. In the beginning, God created for 26 generations the Aleph, which is the first letter of the Aleph base, complained to the Almighty, saying, Master of the world, you make the first letter, and I'm the first letter, but you took the second letter. Remember we said before the base is like a B, the second letter of the Aleph base, and you started the creation with the second letter. So he said, well, the world in the fullness was created only for the merit of the Torah. What's the world for? To raise up the people in learning Torah. Tomorrow will reveal myself and give the Torah to the Jewish people. After 26 generations, Torah was given in the year 2448 after creation. Then I will place you at the head of the 10 Commandments, because the first word is Anochi. Anochi means I. And the first line, the Lord your God. So really, even though the second letter of the creation, second letter of the Aleph base started the work of creation, and still it was the Aleph, the first letter, started the 10 Commandments, which is in the merit the world was created. So hopefully we whetted your time. Maybe in the future we'll get into future ideas. Like I say, there's just so much to talk about even from the creation. And I'd like to teach people, they like to hearing all these stories about right from the beginning. There's so much to delve into. And like we say, there's still the idea of evolution and the creation idea, which there's never an end to talking about that, or people are always interested in that. In the meantime, I'll give you something to chew over, and in the meantime, have a good day. Shalom. Welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Delmar Chabad Center, and today's topic is time. And this is a very interesting idea. It's a deep idea, and don't get saying, oh, we're going to get into the deepest physiological and physical ideas that you need maybe a postgraduate degree in physics to understand this. But we're going to take it on a rabbinical idea. We're going to bring it down where people can understand it, and we're going to deal with it, of course, from a Jewish viewpoint of time. Because, again, time is not so absolute. It could be like, for example, or we know a day is 24 hours, but you know that if you're doing nothing or you're lonely, 24 hours of a day could last forever. And if you're having a good time, that day goes by in a flash. So there's something funny in our own experiences that we understand about time. What is it? How is it conceived? And again, like I say, in the rabbinical sources, how is it viewed? Now, time is one of the most obscure riddles of the human consciousness. A riddle whose solution has been sought by thinkers for the last 2,500 years. What is time? Has it an independent existence as a created entity, perceptible to the senses, or is the concept existing only in the human mind, in which case it is eternal? If time is something created, what kind of time existed before? Maimonides, the great rabbinical thinker, asserts that time was created simultaneously with the world. This, he maintains, is, quote, as undoubtedly a fundamental principle of the law of Moses, next in importance to the principle of God's unity. In the present study, my purpose is to explain the view of our sages as expressed in the Talmud, the Medrash, and biblical exegesis, which I shall preface by a brief review of the main lines throughout on the subject. Contemporary sciences that were headed by, in recent times, by Professor Einstein concur in Maimonides' view that time is a perceptible entity which constitutes a fourth dimension, the other three, of course, being length, breadth, and height. When we measure the length, breadth, and height of a growing tree, we should also consider the time of its growth as an intrinsic measurement. When we draw a line on paper, we should measure the time it took to draw, just as we measure its length. This applies to all things. Now, Plato holds that time is related to the motion of matter. Before the creation of the universe, time in our sense did not exist. It was rather in the nature of eternity. That he calls eon. And this eternal time has no motion in neither before nor after. Aristotle follows Plato in relating time to motion, defining it as follows. Time is the number of motion divided into anterior and posterior. It exists both within and without the mind. In its quality of number, it is in the mind, for without that which counts, the mind, there can be no count. And without the present, there can be no before or after. But motion itself is outside the mind. If you thus conceive of time, it is in the mind, but its matter is outside it. Crackus briefly states Aristotle's theory thus: time is an accident, which is both consequent to and conjoined with motion. Neither can exist without the other. Motion does not exist without time, and time is unintelligible save in conjunction with motion. Whatever is not subject to motion does not come under the category of time. Aristotle dwells at length on the above four premises and other problems involved in this theory. The difficulty raised first by Straton and in earlier Greek philosophy, and then by Crackus, that the state of continued rest also comes under the category of time, is anticipated and answered by Aristotle himself. Aristotle holds that the universe is eternal, and so in motion and time. The Stoics, too, follow Aristotle and Plato in reference to time. Well, hopefully we're not getting above the heads. We're going to bring into the Jewish idea in just a second. Follow the first Jewish philosopher to deal specifically with this question writes, time came into existence together with or after the creation of the world. The world preceded time. God created time. He agrees with Plato's assumption of a kind of eternal time before creation. Augustine, there was no time prior to creation. With creation, time too came into being. With respect to God, all time is like one day. The term yesterday or tomorrow is not applicable to him. Saadia Gaon, another great Gaon from about 1500 years ago. Time is nothing but the measurement of the duration of corporeal bodies. That which is not body is beyond time and measurement of duration. Rav Avram Bar Chia, time is naught but a term signifying the duration of existing things. If there can be no existing things, there is no term to describe time. For time is nothing but the number of cycles or spheres which pass on existent things according to anterior and posterior. Time exists only in the mind and is comprehended by the intelligence. Before the 6 days of creation, once again, there was no time. So we have so far an idea throughout Jewish philosophy, and actually hanging into the Greek philosophy's idea, is just that there's time as part of the world, an intrinsic part of the world. Therefore, before creation, before there was a world, there was no time. And so far we have agreement from all philosophers all over. Maimonides elaborates on the subject, stating, since the nature of time embarrasses the greatest philosophers, some of them being altogether unable to comprehend it, what can be expected of those who do not probe the nature of things? Again, those who believe in the Torah of Moses, they believe that everything has been brought by the eternal into existence out of non-existence. Even time itself is among the things created, for time depends on motion. Now, motion is an accident in the mover. Well, the mover himself, upon the motion of whose time depends, is himself a created entity, which has passed from the non-existence to existence. We say that God existed before the creation of the world, though the verb existed applies to imply the notion of time. We also believe that he existed for an infinite time before the universe was created. But in these cases, we do not mean time in its true sense. We only use the term to signify something analogous, a semblance of time. Fodi suggests that this means that there was no time in existence at all, the mind only assuming such a state. Maimonides himself does not explain what he meant by semblance of time. The Elbow, in another famous rabbinical work, Ikarim, explains the phrase by stating that there are two kinds of time. One, that which is measured and numbered by the motion of the sphere, and with there are distinctions of anterior and posterior, equal and unequal. This is called the order of time, as explained in the Medrash. It teaches the order of time existed previously, meaning from the first day of the creation of the sphere. Two, unmeasured duration, conceived only in thought, is eternal, and existed before the creation of the world and continued to exist after its passing. However, in that duration there was no apparent order of time due to the motion of the sphere, since there was no motion or existence of the sphere. This is called time and not order of time. This Maimonides called semblance of time. Going to another few more later philosophers later in time than what we're dealing with now. Gersonides explains that this time is created as well as motion, is a continuous quantity existing partly in a subject and partly independently. This particular instance stands between the potential and the actual. Gersonides gives 10 proofs that time cannot be infinite. Time is posterior to motion because motion gives time its quantitative aspect according to its anterior and posterior state. I'm going to skip to some more ideas that we're dealing with philosophy. I hope it wasn't that over anybody's head. I mean, it was difficult philosophy, but again, I just want to bring out, maybe it's worth in its own right, that there is, people have philosophy, and again, they're more familiar with secular sources, maybe the Greek philosophies, the philosophies they took in college, but just to say there is Jewish philosophy, and has been, and holds its own, I mean, whether we're going to be objective, dogmatic about it, but at least in anybody's eyes, they would just say it holds its own in any of the philosophical works. So if that was a lesson, suffice it, let it be a lesson. But of course, there's deeper ideas too. And now we're going to get into more of the Torah ideas. And now I'm not going to say it's more simple, but on the other hand, as many times we do say, the Torah was written in such a way that everybody could understand it. So sometimes it's simplistic, but there's some deep truths in the simplicity. Time in the Torah. On the first verse it says, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Bereshis is similar to Berisha, in the first. The first according to the order of creation, but not to the order of time, since time was then not a non-existence. Significant adjectives is in the Medrash. At the head of his work, God created the heavens and the earth. This means Brishona, at the beginning. Beginning then is a sense of first, is a semblance of time. Maimonides, in his famous work, Guide of the Perplexed, time itself was created. Therefore, Scripture employs the term Bereshis, meaning the principle, using the base, noting in. When there's a little bit of Hebrew, a base in front of a word means in. It's just a B sound, which is the prefix of a noun, shows on in. In, Bereshis, in the beginning, in creating a principle, God formed the beings above and below. This interpretation is in accord with the theory of a newly created world. The Milkot, some maintain that Bereshis is in the construct state, in the complement, time being omitted. Like in the beginning of time. There should be the word times in there. It's very short-handed. The author of the guide explained the term Bereshis to mean that with the principle of primacy and matter of God created the heavens and the earth, and there was no prior material. The Rabbi Isaac Abarbanel writes similarly, in the beginning of the newly created time God created, if it is characteristic of our language occasionally to omit the absolute complement, even in matters patent and palatable, how much more it is fitting to omit it here, since time is something so difficult to comprehend and so intangible in essence. Now we have even a later work just to explain this even further. But I just want to get into more midrashim just to bring out some more statements from our rabbis. Let's see, the first time, it was there was evening and there was morning. Because now before we were talking about Bereshis, we were talking about in the beginning. So like we said, we had many statements from the rabbis and omitted even a few just to go on with this material. But that was the idea that time, once you say in the beginning, already you have defined time. There's a beginning of something, and that's a definition of place with heavens and the earth and time. So it comes together as creation. But here, I mean, that was a little bit of a hint. You have to look into it. Surely at the end of the first paragraph when it says and there was evening and there was morning, surely it's a matter of time. Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rabbi Shimon, commented, it is not written, let there be evening, and there was evening, which proves that the order of the divisions of time existed previously. Ravo observed, it shows that God created worlds and destroyed them until he created ours, saying, these please me and those did not please me. Some of our sages reportedly held the opinion that time existed before the creation. This is dubious because the theory that time cannot be conceived to have had a beginning was taught by Aristotle, as shown as objectionable. Those who made this assertion were led to take it by the phrases one day, second day. Taking these terms literally, they asked, what determined the first day since there was no rotating sphere and no sun? Because if you look into the Bible, that was only created on the fourth day. The answer to this question they found in the above-mentioned rabbinical dicta. We can understand that this is in order to answer the difficulty which naturally presents itself. How could time exist before the creation of the sun? However, our sages speaking of the light created on the first day explicitly state, these are the same luminaries which were created on the first day, but were not fixed in their places until the fourth day. The purpose of this comment was indeed to answer that very difficulty. Well, we're going to have several expositions to the rabbinical passage. Some hold that Rabbi Yehuda means that the order of the divisions of time existed in the worlds created and subsequently destroyed. We just said that. But others maintain that even according to the interpretation that worlds were created and destroyed only in thought, I mean just in an abstract idea, statement that the order of the divisions of time existed previously referred to the point when these were fashioned in thought, but not to a prior period. This is just like maybe a more abstract idea. Others again related to the 2,000 years preceding the creation of the world, when the Torah was conceived, that is, when it was born in the divine mind, the order of time thenceforth being established. Now let's go on to the next verse when it says, "For 6 days the Almighty made the world." It is reasonable to infer that the Lord made the world in 6 days, and they are concluded in the creation, thus indicating that time was created. If it would have said in 6 days, but say for 6 days, now in 6 days, it would suggest that that is eternal. And on the seventh day, God created, Bayom, in the seventh day, in that day, the Almighty finished. Commentary on the fact that Scripture does not say on the 6th day, but it says on the 7th day, Ibn Ezra observes, some maintain that the days themselves were created. The text therefore means that with the creation of the 7th day, the Almighty finished his work, the base and in the day being instrumental. Now let me explain even a deeper sense here. That it says in the Medrash, on the 7th day the Almighty finished the world. This teaches that he ordered the measure of day and the measure of night on the 7th day. Buber in his annotation remarks that this is unintelligible, but it is clear that the reference is to the view of the Ibn Ezra quoted previously. The meaning of the Medrash then is that the actual time of the 7th day was created on the 7th day. Well, I'm going to skip in on a few ideas over here because we're slow on time, but we're going to explain a little bit about the time of the calendar of our day. Now, the statement that the 6 days were created, that regarding the creation of the 7th day required further illumination. If they refer to that time which is bound up with that matter, that surely was created only in the first instance, in which matter was created and in which motion began, to which one cannot speak of its further creation, since time had already begun to flow. How then can it be said that all the 7 days were created? To explain this, we must first state a major principle pertaining to the concept of time, which many physicists, headed by Einstein himself, accept, namely that all conceptions of this measurement of time are relative to frames of varying velocities. For example, our day, consisting of a day and a night, comprise the time that the Earth rotates on its axis, covering about 24,000 miles at the rate of 1,000 miles an hour. Our year is 365 days, the time in which the Earth revolves around the sun. If we could imagine that we are living on the planet Neptune, which takes 164 years and 68 days to revolve around the sun, besides its own rotation, then as inhabitants of this planet, we should have a different conception of the time of 1 year, which is 664 times as long as our year on Earth. Conversely, the year of an inhabitant of the planet Mercury, which revolves around the sun in 88 days, is shorter, measuring about 1/4 of a year. Now, everyone can himself experience the cursing of time in various degrees. When a man is in distress or in pain, every minute seems a day to him. The minutes and seconds pass slowly. The sages found this idea expressed in the Torah, where it says, "And it came to pass in the course of those many days." Their comment on that is there were days, well, this is the beginning of Exodus, so it's when the Jewish people were in exile in Egypt. Those were days of sorrow. Therefore, they're not called many, because it's very slow. Not so, however, with joy or pleasure. The time speeds and we hardly notice them passing. What it says about Jacob, and they seemed unto him but a few days, the 7 years that he worked for Rachel. The 7 years are characterized as a few days, because each day brought him closer to his goal. He felt pleasure in his work, and the time passed rapidly. The measure of time is thus relative to and dependent on one's state of being. In the main, however, it is bound up with the category of place. This reflection may be illustrated by a clock where a minute is subdivided to 60 seconds, right? Custom makes a second appear as a small unit of the measurement of time. But there are clocks which we can see the pendulum pass 10,000 units in the course of a minute. There even exists a clock in which we can see the pendulum pass 1,000,000 units a minute. Of course, we then conceive of a minute as a long time. Or to take another example, the speed of light coming into the earth, at 186,000 miles per second. And if one were able to travel so fast and pass over that distance in 1 second, well, that second would appear to him as much as a month now appears to us. From which we have been said, it will readily be understood now that the conception of time is something fixed and determined, but only relative to position, mind, and place. How many more variant outlooks must there be in the spiritual world? There is a measure of time whereby an infinite number of years is but as one day. There is a measure whereby 1 second is longer than 1,000 years of ours. Dr. Grunwald, who was a student of Einstein, writes an explanation of the theories of relatives of time. Newton in his school taught that there is an absolute time flowing with unvarying speed, and that we can measure its rate of flow by means of units of time arbitrarily chosen. Furthermore, we can fix time differences in increments equally for all with complete absoluteness. Mach says we cannot observe absolute time. Such time does not exist in physics. And if we do fix the rate of time flow, according to our convention, by comparison with the rotation of the earth about its axis, then we already have a measure of time usable by everyone. Einstein asserts that absolute time does not exist and that its rate of flow, that is to say the measure of time differences in increments, is not necessarily equal in different coordinate systems. The concept of relative time is also found in, again, our scriptural commentaries regarding the 6 days of creation. Before the creation of the sun and the earth was darkness for 3 days. Proof of this can be found in a deeper sefer. The thesis is just the opposite, namely that during the first 3 days there was only light, and no night, and the light created in the first day served till the 4th day. Now Rashi brings out, it was a classic commentary, that light and darkness functioned in confusion. Thus during the first 3 days of the light would undulate once every minute, that sight would be illuminated by a half a minute, and darkness for half a minute. This would be so instead of making the rotation about its axis in 24 hours, as it is present. The earth at that time made it every minute. Now, again, to explain what this Rashi means, that the darkness and light flow together. In the work of creation, they used the expression, there was evening and there was morning, with reference to each day in order to intimate that each complete day was about 1,000 years. And it does say for 1,000 years it was like yesterday. Now from the scriptural formulation respecting the second day, we may draw inference regarding all the other days, for the first day was equal to all the others 6. So therefore, who knows how many thousands of years the first day included. Therefore was the formula particularized for each individual day to show that its second day was 1,000 years. Well, we want to conclude. We have a few more minutes to conclude the thesis, and we really could go on. And again, suffice it to say again that the Torah is deep, and like I say, you can bring down works from Einstein, is probably people consider the greatest scientist that ever lived, and we see that we can bring in Torah sources that are thousands of years ago that could really complement or even agree with what Einstein has to say. So, like I say, if these are beautiful ideas about time, I try to pick quotes that weren't as difficult. I probably understand that these are a little bit difficult for the more people who have a background in the physics people and these concepts. Sure, it was very interesting for the other people. If it was a little bit above people's head, maybe this is enough of a point that you see that person in Torah could be intellectual, and as many times as we say in philosophical and as scientific as any philosophers or scientifics that ever live and do live even today. Let me just conclude then with a few more words over here from the Maharal, probably just to show you that Maharal lived about the 16th century in Prague, very famous rabbi at that time, and still today there's statues even by the government that put him up. Time or place are but one, as is known to the wise. That the above may be summarized in the following three propositions. One, time was created, we said today. Two, even though again there are divergent ideas, we're not going to say these are absolute ideas. For the majority of the major commentaries will agree on these things. Again, time was created. Two, our standard of time is relative, not absolute. And three, time and space are two concepts which essentially are but one. The above researches into the nature of time enable us to shed light on many fundamentals of the Torah and on many rabbinical dicta. There's still so much we have to talk about relativity. And remember that the Torah, of course, is very time-oriented. Many times, and we've devoted shows already to this, about the Jewish calendar. You just don't do what you feel like when you feel like it. There's requirements of time. There's standards of time. The holidays and the Sabbath, one of the major mitzvahs, are delegated with time. Our day is subdivided into time. There's certain times when you can say the Shema Yisrael in the morning, in the first quarter of the day. There's just time is really very much limitations in Judaism. But together with that, to find the unlimited expression in the mitzvahs and the commandments that are centered in time. So therefore, this is really a whole different aspect of being, if we may say, locked into time in different words, because a person can't grow younger. We all grow older. For example, you can't change the day. Today's a day, and you can't change it for tomorrow. If today's a Monday, then you can't change it for a Tuesday. You can't go back in years. So in a certain sense, we are locked into time. But on the other hand, a person could find themselves above time or beyond time. And that's what we're going to have to see. We're going to have to research this a little bit more. We're going to have to talk about this, that even within the confines of time. And now we're just ourselves, but even Judaism puts us in the confines of time. Not just religion, just float above time, float around. That is not what Judaism has to say. Could be other religions, but not Judaism. And therefore, we have to find where we can find that infinite expression of ourselves and the Almighty inside where the mitzvahs are saying that there's time limited. The world was created in time. We are locked into time. But let's see how we, in a certain sense, can unlock time and make more of our time by ourselves, which will have to continue on because simply time is limited. And therefore, this show has to conclude also because of the constraints of time. But hopefully that discussing time and the abstract views of time, that we have made it a little bit understandable, hopefully, that there is something to research, something so natural as time, that we can find in philosophy. But of course, here in the Jewish view, we like to find Jewish sources for the concept of time. And I hope you understood and enjoyed today's show. Thank you very much.